Okay, we are live. Hello, beautiful humans. I'm Jess DuBose, ADHD coach here with Kim today. We're going to be talking about how your hormones can affect your ADHD. And I know this is a conversation I've had with many, many people, so I'm really excited to be here with Kim to talk about this. So Kim, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, first, thank you, Jessica, or Jess, for having me with you here today. So, I am a women's hormone health coach, and I support women through various holistic practices from functional nutrition, lifestyle management, really diving into functional testing as well, hormone testing, and just seeing what's happening with our blood work more than just our hormones, because our cortisol levels and our nutrients and micronutrients have such an effect on how our mood is, how our energy is, how our periods are. And then I also dive into Tao and Tantric healing arts and somatic work to support women around their periods, infertility, going into perimenopause and menopause. So anything basically related to our sexual health, reproductive hormones.
That's amazing. I'm so glad people like you exist in the world. Okay, so my
I'm
first,
happy to be here.
yeah, my first question, I know a little bit about this, but I'm consistently surprised at how many people don't know. So people who have a menstrual cycle,
Mhm.
what are the stages of the cycle and what does that mean?
So I love that you're asking this question, because when I was thinking about our conversation today, that was like one thing that I really wanted to tie in, because it is so important, right? And I'm not an ADHD expert, so this is where we get to like bounce off each other. And I'm assuming you hear women saying like certain times of the month, my ADHD is worse than others.
Yep.
And this is kind of probably what is happening. So we have four phases of our cycle. Okay. There's our menstrual phase, follicular, ovulation, and luteal phase. The first day of our cycle is the first day of our bleed. So soon as you have, so if you kind of have a little bit of spotting, say late at night, I wouldn't really count that as day one, like kind of that pinkish little spot. But if you have a full bleed, you have to put a tampon in, or you're wearing your period panties, that's your day one. And you're going to count forward until you get your next period. Generally speaking, a healthy period is anywhere between 3 and 7 days. If it's more than 7 days, it's considered a heavy bleed. A lot of times, higher estrogen levels are associated with that. Not all the time, but a lot of times. And so that is our menstrual phase. During that time, our hormones are at their lowest. So our main hormones are estrogen, our progesterone, and our testosterone. And that is why a lot of us, and I'm about to get my period, so that I feel tired today. And that's like normal. Now, if you're so tired and not feeling so crappy that you got to call off work consistently, you don't want to get out of bed, that's not normal. But just like, I don't want to go to the gym today, that's kind of like a normal time for when you're on your period. I actually recommend probably not going to the gym, like go for a walk or do a light stretch class or yoga class. This is our inner winter. Think winter
Mm.
time, we go into hibernation, right? The animals go into hibernation.
Mhm.
And our mother nature even, right? Like, I'm up from Canada originally. I live in sunny Florida now, but like Canada, it's winter, there's snow everywhere, and like things are quiet, right?
Yeah.
And then we move into our inner spring, which is our follicular phase. So think around like day 5 of your cycle, and all of a sudden you're just like, whoo, I got this like burst of energy again, right? This is our inner spring, our follicular phase, our estrogen starting to rise. The energy is rising. We may start feeling a little more creative. We have a little more patience. We want to maybe try something new. This is that time of the month. Then we move into ovulation, which, I mean, I think most of us women are very familiar with. This is the time that we are fertile. But I'm just going to throw this in there because a lot of women don't know this either. Us women alone, we are only fertile 12 to 24 hours. So say about a day. But the sperm could live in us for up to 5 days. So that gives us a longer fertility window. So just keeping that in mind, if you are having unprotected sex, or if you actually are trying to conceive, right? Keeping that in mind. So ovulation is our inner summer.
Mm.
So think around that time, usually we have the most energy. We think like we're super women and we're feeling extra sexy, extra confident. We're motivated. It's because our estrogen and our testosterone have peaked.
Mm.
Nature smart, testosterone boosts our sex drive. We're feeling maybe like our libido is up, our sex drive's up. This is why. And then our luteal phase is a little bit longer. It could be about 12 days. And it's kind of split into two parts. So the first part of your luteal phase, you may still kind of feel like you have that ovulation energy, like the energy is a little bit high. But when you get into that second side of it, so that's that week before your period, that's when that moodiness could come in. This is our inner autumn. This is maybe when not even just moodiness, but being more emotional, not feeling as confident. Some women tend to be a little bit more vocal and maybe not in the ways that they want to. And so during this time, in a healthy cycle, the beginning part, our progesterone is going to peak. Estrogen starts to drop a little bit. If our progesterone levels are not normal, and they're lower, that's where that anxiety could start kicking in. That's when we feel extra sleepy, maybe, or even we're not having good sleep, because progesterone does help our sleep,
Mm.
does help with our, so if our levels are low, that could cause insomnia. So this is where you may feel like that shift in energy again towards the end, as we go from this peak of high progesterone and then we start to decline, getting ready for our next cycle as all our hormones. And in that time, like estrogen will kind of like creep up just a little bit for a moment and come back down.
Right. Okay.
Not a peak like ovulation, but just a little roller coaster bump. We'll call it that.
Right. Okay. So progesterone helps with sleep. I
It's
know.
our calming. It's our calming. It does help with sleep. And it's like I kind of laugh. It's like our natural anti-anxiety medication for us women.
Oh, interesting. And
Hmm.
then I know estrogen levels helps with executive functioning, right?
Yes, it helps with dopamine and
Mm-hmm.
also dopamine production and serotonin production.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's where we could feel in the first half of our phase, follicular and ovulation, when the levels are higher, this is what we say our masculine energy is more in that first half. And like you said, executive function. So we are more thinking logical. This is a good time to, you know, um, have big presentations. See, I'm stumbling on words because I'm about to have my period. This is like my inner time. But and it's okay because I'm showing an example of how like it is. But if I was probably on day 10, I'd be like standing here, just words flowing out.
Mm-hmm.
But this is our creative time. So if you're doing any writing, follicular and ovulation, like when estrogen's higher, executive function. If you're doing business deals, if you're starting a new routine with your kids, you're going to have, just more patience with that and maybe even be a little bit more creative with that. If you have to hold big meetings, any type of workshops, anything like that, you're just going to feel more natural in your flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
How does that feel with you when I explain that? And just from what you hear, maybe from your clients that, have ADHD, or just other women that you talk to in conversation, because I'm sure this just comes up in regular conversation, like hormones and periods do for me.
They do. It's something I often, it's the question I will ask when people are, especially when I'm in conversations with clients, they're like getting upset with themselves about how hard things are right now. It's like, oh, when is your period coming up? Like, oh, yeah. And for me, I get surprised by mine like every month. It comes. Mine is very regular. But I
Mhm.
always get surprised at how tired I am, like a couple days before my period. I'm like, why am I so tired? And then I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and that's how I feel like today. Like I said, I'm on day 26 and I'm a pretty regular 28, 29 day. And Yeah, for that first moment, just like you, I'm like, "Ugh, why am I? Oh yeah, I'm on day 26. Okay. And like I'm saying to you and to whoever is watching or listening to like to the replay later, like be compassionate with yourself. Like don't be so hard on yourself. And I actually just I don't know if you know about I think you know about this that I created the womb wisdom journal like a few
I
years ago.
Yes, I remember that, but I have not actually seen it. So tell us
Seen
a
it.
little bit about it.
Just I'll it's right here. I'll grab
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Great.
It's right here. So basically, I created this journal so that you can, or us women, that we could start tracking our cycles. So the beginning part of it, kind of what I went over already. I described like the different phases of the cycle, and then you actually get to journal. So, day one, this is month two, it's for 3 months. When you're tracking your cycle, when you're doing any hormone healing, you need 3 months. One, just to really get in tune with your body. And two, when it comes to natural healing, it's not like taking a pill that in 2 weeks, it takes some time. So, like, and depending if you've been struggling with a symptom for years, which some women, do come to me about, it might take 6 months. And it's just being really like, yeah, just like patient and like I said, being compassionate with yourself. So in this journal, like every single day, I have a question like, how do I get to love myself in my womb today? So really just like connecting with yourself every single day of the month. And then for each phase, I have specific questions. So for example, here for the menstrual phase, one of the questions is, what do I want to release with my bleed? Right.
Ooh.
So not only is it like a physical detox as we have our periods, but it's also a spiritual detox, right? So what do you want to release as you're on your period? And then you could start, and I know one, I think I have it here is in the follicular phase. One of the questions is hold on here, let me just find it. With the follicular phase is uh like what is my focus for this month basically, right? And just like we're on a cycle every month, we're also cyclical beings. So let me rewind a little bit. What got me into this is I used to be a bikini competitor and I lost my period for 8 months. And in that time, the doctor only had the pill to offer to me. And I was like, but that's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to get to the root cause of why I don't have my period. It was because I was overtraining, and really it was because I was just had too much on my plate. It was the stress. So I share this because after I healed myself, I did compete again. But when I was preparing for my show, I had to move things around in my life. I didn't teach yoga during that time. I went for a massage every Friday after my training sessions. Like I had to, so for that time, for those 3 cycles, 4 cycles, one of my focuses was preparing for my show.
Hmm.
My focus wasn't to build my business in that time.
Right.
And it's a shift. So that's why you get to reflect like, what is my focus? And then you're not so hard on yourself too. So yeah, I created this journal and it's just and as I say, like outside of the journal, just like if you're following, some of these apps, be careful with the apps. Not all of us, ovulate on day 14, like like some of them say. But with the apps, it does give you a bit of an idea of where your energy should go. And then you could plan, right? And it doesn't always work like this in our Western society, but you kind of know, okay, my period's going to be coming up in a week, so don't overbook myself. I think a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us still have a little flexibility to work remote. So can you maybe like have a remote day the first 2 days of your period or the day before when you know your energy really drops? And that's a beautiful thing, like when we start to track our cycles.
Yeah. I always know like day two, it for me is always like, I don't want to do anything. I just kind of want to sit around. And anytime I can actually plan for that, I'm like, oh, yes, I'm not doing anything extra today. And maybe not anything at all if I can.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. And I'm celebrating you for recognizing that and honoring that
Yeah.
as well. And I know there's probably some moms here or, some caregivers, the perimenopausal women that are in their 40s. Some of you I know are probably taking care of your parents, because I'm 39, I'm blessed. My parents are, 68 and 70 and they're still very healthy. So I don't have to worry about that. But I'm also an occupational therapist and I've worked in the geriatric world my whole career. So I have seen that, so in that time, I just share that, like, that first couple days when your energy is low, can a partner support you? Is there any way that maybe meal prep so that mom and dad who you're taking care of have some food, for those couple days you do? It does involve a little bit of planning. I'm admitting that. But I think when you plan like that, it's going to take so much off your plate when your period actually comes and you're like, wow, I feel so much better.
Okay, so ADHDers have something called time blindness. Are you
Okay,
familiar
teach
with
me
that?
because I don't know about that.
So time blindness is the best way that I love to explain it is like 2 minutes and 2 years are like the same thing in an ADHDer's brain. There is
Okay,
no difference.
okay.
So, oftentimes, like our society is very based on time, and
Mhm.
there's like morality around time. So a lot of the struggles that ADHDers have of like showing up time to work, making sure they remember a partner's birthday, like they're shamed for the things that are all around time when it's really not. It's not a careless thing. They're not trying to forget. It's literally no concept of time when they're doing a thing. There's ADHDers tend to be like paying attention to everything or super hyper focused into one thing that they're working on. And so then they're just oblivious that 8 hours have passed while they're working on this project that they're really excited about, and they'll forget to eat or go to the bath, like just
Yeah.
general life things. So when you think about planning and tracking a cycle, that's like requires a lot of executive functioning, which ADHDers struggle with. And
Okay.
planning, that's like thinking about time, also something that they struggle with. So one of the if you are not a planner and cannot have struggle with keeping up with an app or writing it down or whatever the case is, what I love to do is just noticing when you take notice. So like I don't have ADHD, so this doesn't necessarily apply to me, but because I don't really like to track my cycle,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm like, oh, I'm really tired. Oh, my period's probably about to start. Oh, I probably should be really kind to myself over the next couple of days. What can I drop out of my schedule? So I don't plan super far ahead of time, but I like start to get more in tune with my body in that way and taking notice. And then another thing, uh, that with that is like when you have a really good partner in your life, what I love watching is when people have really great partners in their lives, they like those people can support and help remind you. And even just really good friends. I have some really good, I'm a single woman, live by myself. Some of my friends are single women that live by themselves, and we'll be talking to each other and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired and da da da. And I'll be like, isn't your period supposed to be starting like tomorrow? Like, oh yeah. Just help each other remind of those things, but just having some awareness around it could be like brings some of that like levity of, oh, I don't have to be so hard on myself. Oh, I don't have to expect myself to be able to do all of the things all at once right now. But you don't have to like super plan either if that's not your jam.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I say like plan a little bit once you know what? It kind of happens naturally. It really does start to happen naturally. And so at the beginning, it could seem real tedious. And like I say, like be easy on yourself. And it might be more like just the planning and tracking, just so you start understanding. Okay. I mean, the biggest thing, if anything, Mark, put a big red circle on your calendar or somewhere on the first day of your period. Just so if anything, if you lose track of time and you feel like a certain way, you could go back and like start counting and be like, oh, I'm on day 17. This is why I feel this way. Okay. Right. So just at least you have a starting mark. Like that's what I would say, like at a minimum. The other thing I just think of, you know, there was something you said, and I was like, what about alarms? Oh, just because you said how people, this is the OT in me thinking, how people get like so into things, right? They don't lose track of time. Like if even just setting an alarm, I don't know if that helps, just to like remind yourself, like, oh, it's time to get up and stretch or walk or go drink some water.
Yeah, sometimes it depends. For ADHDers, it's like usually they set up 20,000 alarms and then they just start ignoring them. So it kind of depends on the person and what stage of life. One thing that I do notice, and I actually haven't talked about this in a minute, but um, a lot of ADHDers will have a thing that they're doing and it's working for them for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden, like the alarm system they were using no longer works. And so what they tend to do is throw the whole system out the window and try to find something else to use. And I'm like, sometimes you don't have to throw the whole thing out. You just have to tweak it just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So for alarms, if you have alarms and that system was working for you, just change the sound of the alarm so it's not boring and so it's different and gets your interest again. So then it brings in a little bit of dopamine instead of it just being this like, ugh, this thing that you want to ignore again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that being like helpful with that too.
Yeah, totally. But I like the idea of the alarms. Um, I probably should set an alarm in my phone to remind myself about what time of month I start my period, because I'll forget to like bring my menstrual cup with me and then be like,
Yeah. Like I said, if you just even mark your first day, you could like count back and you'll just see it like, oh, I feel this way. And actually, when you were saying before, like, losing track of time and like writing things down doesn't always work. And correct me if I'm wrong, but do you do any like breath work or meditation with your clients?
yeah,
So this is actually one of the activities that I have in the journal, and I talk about cosmic breathing.
okay.
I don't know, maybe Dom even talked about this when when you
I
guys
have
were
not heard of cosmic breathing. What is
so
cosmic?
cosmic breathing is basically taking a breath right from your pubic bone. You feel the breath coming up the front side of your body, up to the crown of your head as you inhale. And as you exhale, you're feeling the breath coming down the back side, like down through your neck, down your spine. And then it's looping around. So it's like circular, right? It's actually a tantric breath. And I first learned it from Dom, but then when I did my Tao and Tantric Healing Arts for Women, that certification, I like learned it a second time. So it's very beneficial in many ways. One, it just really helps you connect to your body. It runs through your whole chakra system. It gets energy flowing. It's great to be orgasmic if you're by yourself. If you're with a partner and you both are doing it, it's like just energy is like flowing, right?
Wow.
But so yeah, it's a beautiful breath work practice, and you could do it as little as like 2 to 3 minutes, and that's what I say in the journal. Put your hands on your womb, over your uterus, like just below the belly buttons, and do a couple rounds of breath like that, and just check in with yourself. Just be like, how am I feeling today? And that might just give you a little bit instead of like worrying about journaling. And it could be first thing in the morning when you get up. Maybe you're at your desk and you're starting to feel like you're all over the place and you just need a little break. Just tap in. And as you do that a little more, you might start to see patterns too. Like, this breath work isn't working for me right now. I'm still a little scattery. Okay, maybe. And then you look, oh, yeah, okay, I'm on day 19. That's like that transition from ovulation to luteal energy big time. I know I get really irritable day 19, 20 in the morning. My
Mm.
patience is slim. And I was like, oh, because I'm leaving that high energy I like. And now I'm like going into fall, inner fall. Or you're just like check in and you're like, wow, these like I'm thinking more clear. Oh, I'm on day 8,
Mm.
right? So just like that little check-in just to see where you are. I'm tired today. Okay, well, maybe I get to cancel those plans.
Yeah, yeah. I Everything just went out of my brain. Hmm. Oh, I do these things with my clients that I call them transition exercises, but they're basically little mini breath work meditation because transitions can be really hard for ADHDers. Um, and I don't mean like big life transitions, yes, those too, but
Mhm.
I mean like getting out of the car and going into the house or going from one meeting to the next. And like it's like uh, ADHDers tend to be so in flow and present where they're at. And so moving from like, oh my God, it's like when this is a little silly, but when a toddler doesn't want to leave their play date because they're having so much fun. It's like, oh, I don't want it. It's hard for them to bring all of themselves into this next thing. So what I do, I start every coaching session with a little like transition exercise. And so we sit and we close our eyes and we take a couple deep breaths, and then I do a little visual exercise. But I might start using the cosmic breathing in that too, because that's really great. But it's so important. Like it doesn't have to take very long to check in. It could take 1 to 3 minutes to do that, and you just sit with yourself and ask a couple of questions to check in. And part of the thing that I love to say in those spaces too is like the check-in is without judgment. It is an observation, and you don't
Mhm.
even have to change anything in the moment. It's just, okay, if I was an observer looking in on myself, what is going on? Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, interesting. Oh, I have a lot of anger bubbling up. Interesting. Like nothing to do, nothing to change. You don't have to be in the emotion. You don't have to fix the hunger right this second. It's just observing where you are in the moment
Yeah.
could be really powerful to start connecting with yourself in that way. Um, okay. So when women are moving from into perimenopause and menopause,
Hmm.
estrogen levels drop, right?
Yeah, they will drop. They definitely drop. But and what's interesting is, and I'm gonna do a reel on this, or I'm gonna talk about this. So estrogen, we hear so much about estrogen dropping, and it does drop. So from 35, 35 to 45, I want to say it is. I could be off on the number, but starting at 35, the drop as because technically perimenopause starts at 35.
What?
Yeah, it technically does. We're not really like probably feeling most of the symptoms until like mid 40s. Um, well, and there again, it depends on our stress level. Stress is such a huge thing
Mm.
because as our ovaries start to like, I'm going to say transition, I'm not going to say like turn off, as they start to transition and they're not producing as much estrogen, our um our adrenal glands actually produce estrogen as well. But if we have adrenal fatigue, then they're tired. And so they're not going to produce the estrogen to pick up. Now, of course, they're not going to, like the adrenals aren't going to produce as much estrogen as our ovaries, but it can pick up a little bit. So if you are a very stressed out woman, feeling completely burnt out, overwhelmed, there's a greater chance that you're going to have more of those perimenopausal symptoms, especially maybe the brain fog, the executive thinking function, like forgetting things, where I put my keys, all that kind of stuff. You might notice a little bit more of that.
Mm.
So going back to your question, yes, estrogen drops about 35%. But you know what drops even more is progesterone. And it doesn't get talked about. We don't talk about it as much. So remember, progesterones are calming. So if you're already feeling like you're up here and then your progesterone drops and you're like, whoa, now I'm feeling anxious yet too, and I'm not sleeping well, like it's just like a recipe for not feeling great. So, and I say that just to be mindful because I think at the end of the day, I'm sounding like a little bit on repeat, but stress is a big thing too.
Yeah.
Like it comes back to stress, like especially with our progesterone levels. That's a big factor. So it's naturally dropping, but then if you're really stressed out already, it's going to drop. Those symptoms are going to come show up even more.
Yeah.
So paying attention to your stress levels. I know it's easier said than done. I've been under a lot of stress lately. I know I shared it a little bit with you, Jess, just with going through a couple accidents. Um, and for me, journaling and nature have been like the big things for me personally. I'm lucky I have the beach close to me. I go sit at the ocean, so that has been a big thing. But yeah, just our estrogen is going to naturally drop. So stress levels, eating your healthy fats. So things like avocado, coconut oil, actually eating coconuts, adding seeds and nuts into your foods could be really helpful. Vitamin E could support our estrogen levels. And then I think just in general with our energy and overall is like having good, healthy protein with all our meals.
Mm.
That's going to prevent those blood sugar spikes. So no, our blood sugar spikes, I don't think in particular, well, I don't know, this is your expertise. Does it impact our ADHD, like your symptoms? I just think of like energy crashes up and down with blood sugar spikes. Like,
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the thing is, depending on the ADHDer, some of them will forget to eat. And so that contributes even further to the crash.
yeah, yeah, I could see that. And then you get hangry and yeah, because your blood sugar is just going to plummet. And then depending what you eat, especially if you go on a carb loading foods, it's going to spike, but then you're going to crash again. Whereas if you have some healthy fats and healthy protein, it's actually going to keep you more stable.
Yeah, yeah. And the trouble with that is feeding ourselves takes so much executive functioning, which is something that ADHDers are lacking with the lack of, I forget the exact science around it, but it's the lack of production of dopamine, or they have less dopamine and serotonin. And so all of these things contribute to making it that much harder to take care of our bodies. And so coming up with systems that work for you to get those healthy fats and proteins is really important. If you are a person with some means, sometimes there are a lot of really great subscription food services out there now where you can buy things that are actually healthy and easy to make. If you are not, then you have to come up with some other systems and structures to make sure that you're going to the grocery store, preparing the food, and then you can cut some of the things. Sometimes it's easier to just buy the thing that's cut up already, the onion that's already cut up, so that you don't have to do it yourself.
You know what I even do myself with vegetables or yeah, vegetables. Because there was like a time every time I went to the grocery store, I love Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are really good, just since we're talking about hormones, Brussels sprouts are really good for helping metabolizing like extra estrogen in our body, like as like a detox, because if our liver's kind of bogged down, we hear of estrogen dominance a lot. Estrogen dominance could be because our body's producing too much estrogen. Yes, we want it to peak, during the first half of our cycle, but we don't want it to stay high, right? So estrogen dominance could be we're just producing too much estrogen, which kind of becomes like toxic in the body, or the estrogen levels high compared to the progesterone because the progesterone levels are low in the second half. So that could be estrogen dominance, and it could show up in two ways. But eating cruciferous vegetables, so our broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, collard greens, all that helps with that detoxification process. But so there was a time Brussels sprouts and broccoli, I'd go to like buy the fresh stuff and I'm like, I'm going to throw half of it out because it looks rotten. So Whole Foods is actually pretty good. They have like pretty decent frozen vegetables. And you could still buy them organic if you want organic. And then it's just like I'm sauteing them usually anyways, or I do like a light little like steam and then just put a little oil on them after. And it's just like, you know, having fresh veggies. So it's different unless you
Yeah.
want to eat them raw. But that's also, I'm just sharing that like, because that can be an option as well as just buying frozen fruit and vegetable. You're still getting the nutrients out of it.
Yeah, that's great. I started buying chopped up broccoli frozen because
Mm-hmm.
they come in the florets, but sometimes they're so big and like it does weird things, but I just found I like the smaller bits in my food, and then I'll mix it with rice and protein and whatever.
Yeah.
It's lovely. You mentioned earlier about vitamin E, right?
Mm-hmm.
What how what what foods have vitamin E, or is that a supplement you would take?
I mean, you could take a supplement and the actual dosage, I can't think off the top of my head, But vitamin E is in a lot of like seeds and
Oh,
um like our seeds and our nuts. You'll get like a lot of the vitamin E in there. It might be in some like I'd have to almost Google it. I just right now I'm not thinking
that's
I'm
okay.
if it's any meats, but definitely in our nuts and seeds for sure.
Okay. And then you were talking about our adrenal glands contribute to producing estrogen.
Hmm.
I I am notoriously bad for understanding how our bodies are and remembering the words. What are adrenal glands? How are they supposed to function?
So our adrenal glands are like kind of sit like towards the back of the body, and that we hear of the fight and flight,
Hmm.
right? So yes, if we are, in danger, we want our adrenal glands to like kick in, our cortisol levels are going to go up, to get us out of there. But they like give us that energy. But what happens if we're like chronically stressed, we're not getting sleep, we're always like in this state of being up here, cortisol is just like pumping and pumping, and it actually that's where there's a precursor progesterone to progesterone. And what happens is that precursor cortisol goes in there. So that's
Mm,
why progesterone doesn't get produced. And
mm,
so, and then the adrenals are just like on overdrive as well with all that. So, um, yeah, it's like it helps us produce our like give us energy,
wow.
basically.
That's
So they and when they are, because there's two, when they're on overdrive all the time, like just like anything, imagine like going running nonstop, just running, for like 40 miles. Like at the end, if you had to do that every day, you're gonna, a couple months later, not even a couple months later, a couple weeks later, you're gonna be like, I'm spent.
and this is where ADHDers, I think, experience burnout more frequently because even though they're not physically running a marathon, sometimes they are because they're running all over the place. If they have, there are actually three different types of ADHD. If they have the hyperactivity one, some of them have that physically, but a
Yeah.
lot of times the hyperactivity is in the brain. And so your brain is going. So even when they're what they call doom scrolling on TikTok or whatever, um, what's happening internally is the shame spiral. Like, oh, I should be doing X, Y, and Z, and da da da. Why can't I do it? Blah 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 blah. So you're like on this hyperdrive, living in fear about how you're treating yourself, and then society is not set up for people in neurodivergence, and so you're sitting in fear around that and fear about getting your taxes in and all the bureaucratic bullshit that takes all of the executive functioning, even to set up a doctor's appointment, even if they are on the whole concept of ADHD medication is a whole other conversation. Like about half of my clients take ADHD meds and then the other half don't. And it's a very personal choice. But for
Hmm.
those who do choose to take it, it is a scheduled C drug, which means that you cannot get more than 1 month supply at a time. So you have to remember to contact your doctor and or pharmacy to get another prescription every single month, and it requires executive functioning to do that. So then if you forget and then all of a sudden you're off your meds and then there's backlog and now it's like forever to try and get yourself up to that. So if you're living in that state all the time, your
Yeah.
adrenal glands, you're functioning in fear, of course it's going to contribute to your hormone levels being all wonky.
Yeah, for sure. And our adrenals also do like impact like our immune system. So I don't know if people with ADHD tend to be sick more often. Also our metabolism as
Mm,
well. So those are, a couple other things just to consider as well with
yeah,
our comes to our adrenal glands.
yeah. Well, okay, so we've talked about like regular periods. What if you have an irregular period?
So a healthy, so
Unhealthy.
yeah. So first, remember I was just saying our actual period, a healthy period is 3 to 7 days. So if
Right.
it's less than three, That's considered a light period. Generally, it's associated to low estrogen levels. No period for 3 or more months is amenorrhea. So that's
Mhm.
a loss of a period for 3 or more months. So that's like, yeah, just not having it for days on end. I suffered it for 8 months. Yeah, it was. And even though I wasn't trying to get pregnant, I was just like, something, it's my body talking to me, right? Like it's not healthy. Even though I had a six pack and looked super fit, my body wasn't healthy. And I do
Right.
talk about that very often. It was probably the most unhealthy I was in my life, even though I looked really fit. Um, and then if your period's more than 7 days, that's considered a heavy period or a long period. So you want it ideally between 3 and 7 days. And then we have our cycle. So our period is when we're bleeding, and then our cycle is from day one until our next period starts. The other thing I also want to say with, and it's especially when I post about this, I get a lot of like backlash on it. So another thing too with our periods, like is whether it's a heavy period or not. So a heavy period, outside of it being more than 7 days, is do you have to change your pad or tampon more than every 2 hours? Now, especially if you're a woman that wears a pad and you want to change it more often just to feel clean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you have to change it because you're bleeding through. Okay, so that's not healthy. Uh, if you're having more than a quarter size blood clot, you're going to have a little bit of clotting coming out, like, maybe like the size of a fingernail or, a dime. But if you're having larger than a quarter, that's not normal as well. Um, so those are some of the big things. Having cramps are not normal. Could I like yell that from the
Say it
rooftop?
again.
It's so common. It's so common, but it's not normal. So if you are having to call out from work, from school, if you're canceling plans every single month because of your cramps and your doctor's not listening to you, come find me on Instagram or go find another doctor or healthcare practitioner because it gets to be looked at.
Yeah.
And it might not be something really serious. It could just be that your estrogen levels are a little bit higher. So that means estrogens are building hormone. So yes, it helps with our, production with the dopamine and serotonin, but it does so many other things too. And it's our building hormone. So it's building up the uterus,
Mm.
to prepare for implantation if we're going to get conceived. And if not, then it's going to shed. And if you have higher estrogen levels, that means the uterine lining is thicker.
Mm.
It has more to shed. And with that, could lead to cramping and also the heavier clots and the longer bleeds because it has to go somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that's, say not normal or healthy on, let's just say caution or a red flag. Um, so then going to the cycle, a healthy cycle is about 26 to 34 days. If you're less than 26, it's considered a short cycle. And if it's longer than 34, it's considered a long cycle. And there's so many reasons why your cycles could be long, so shorter. A lot of times I see, and especially if spotting is involved, lower progesterone levels.
Mm.
If it's longer, it could be PCOS. It could be the higher estrogen levels. I mean, if it's longer too, low estrogen levels because it could lead to amenorrhea. So if you are noticing, and this is what I say, like if it's 1 month, just pay attention. And I know it might be, when you say times condensed, what you were saying before, you might like skip over it. But like, if it's like summertime and you notice that when it's all of a sudden Christmas and you're just like, my period's been so off. I haven't seen it. I've barely seen it. Maybe it's time just to like go get your hormones checked out.
Yeah. Okay, so when you get your hormones checked out,
Mhm.
how do you have a conversation with about that with your doctor in a way that maybe they'd actually listen?
So, I mean, I know it's changed a little bit, like every 3 years for a PAP, but what I like to do personally, like I just go every year for my blood work and I just make it a routine thing. So I'll start with there. If you're just going for your annual checkup or biannual checkup, just ask, be like, I'm getting my pap smear done and I just want to get my hormones checked. With that, a lot of times they do all their other regular blood work, which is your A1C, your fasting blood glucose, cholesterol levels. Just ask them to put in your a female hormone panel as well, right? Now, if you are having symptoms, say, I'm trying to think, not sleeping well, feeling extra tired, and I'm talking about those symptoms because that could tie into low thyroid. And a lot of times doctors are just going to run your TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone. You want a full panel. So
Mm,
uh, which is your T3, T4, free T3. And it is tough because I could say for myself, my own doctor didn't want to run a full thyroid panel for me. I was like, why not? It's 2 extra check marks, right? And I know what I'm talking about. But it really comes down to, trying to advocate for yourself. So if you are having symptoms, it's just saying, I'm having cramps, I'm having heavy periods, I'm concerned, and it's gonna make me feel better if we just like cover all grounds. Can you please run these labs? And really, if your doctor's not open to it, then it's time to find another doctor.
yes, I say that
Side
often.
note, just a little side note. I stumbled across this. If you are in the US, a lot of med spas now do blood work. What the meds, yeah. And if you have insurance, like they'll take a lot of the insurances. So I know mine should, like the med spa by my place takes my insurance, and they did 23 pages of blood work on me. I mean, everything from sensitivities to allergies, like things I wasn't even concerned about. 23 pages. They took my insurance covered it all. They have a doctor there that will like go over it. Of course, they're going to want to try sell you something, but take it with a grain of salt. But listen to the doctor, whatever. And then you could also go back to your doctor too. So just a side note, if you are in the US.
That's awesome. Go get your
Yeah.
blood done at the med
Yeah, you
spa.
could do there.
Let's take
I I personally can order blood work too. I
Oh,
do order
great.
for my clients. The only thing is where I order through, it does not take insurance, but I feel like the rates are a little bit cheaper.
Nice.
Yeah, like I could get my clients a full like female hormone panel with their blood glucose levels, like all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I'm gonna say 120. It's a little bit more. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. It is a little more for a full thyroid panel, maybe, but I'm saying you get all that for under 200 or about $200.
Nice.
So, and then obviously I'd give you a full plan on like getting to the root cause and instead of just saying, here, go take birth control.
Right. Oh man. Oh, we could come up with some sort of package deal. You get the blood work done with you with a plan,
Yeah,
and then we can
we
adjust it
definitely do.
for ADHD stuff too. Yeah. That's
And that just there where my head goes. And I just think of like nutrition being in general, like just not even talking about hormones. Like this is just, what I know with nutrition as well. Um, that is, I feel like a big part that I focus on with my clients, but I think it could be very beneficial for ADHDers. And I don't know if you've had someone on here talking about that, but just like anti-inflammatory foods. I think of like dopamine levels. So as an occupational therapist, I have worked with, I can't even count, probably like at least 300, if not more, Parkinson's patients in my career, which dopamine is a huge thing, right? Dopamine levels and like the body just naturally not producing it anymore. And anti-inflammatory foods is like a big thing
mm,
to like help support the symptoms or like keep it in from progressing.
yeah. Do you know a couple of things that
So big things I think of right away is eliminating processed foods. So a lot of times if it's in like a package that makes noise, that's generally a processed food. Sugars, of course, gluten is like one. Um, Corn, and the only reason being because a lot of it is GMO.
mm,
Soy, being careful with soy, caffeine. give or take. You like just, being mindful with it and see how your body reacts with it. What else? Non-conventional meats, even, and like dairy are
Yeah.
other ones. And
Yeah.
even, a lot of times I'll get asked like, well, what about organic dairy? And I'm like, I don't want to say yes and no, but let's try a little bit and see how you are.
Right. Yeah.
And just see how you react to it. So even watching with like, if it says natural flavors or artificial flavors, like keeping an eye out for that, as maybe you even talk about this, like red dye.
Yeah.
Those are some things definitely looking into. And then going back to what I was saying before about trying not to like eat too much carbs with one meal, and like adding the protein and fats, because that's just going to help with those blood sugar spikes, because the spikes is inflammation,
Right.
especially when it's consistent over time.
Okay. So for my ADHDers who are watching this and are like, oh, I'm going to do all of these things right now. No, you're not. No, you're not. And depending on where you are in your life and what's going on in your world, some of those packaged things are the things that are making sure you're getting any food in your body. So it's okay. It is okay.
Of course, yes.
And if you take anything away from this, take one or two things and start with those instead of trying to do all of it at the same time. My ADHD friends they live in the black and white or the do it all or do a nothing world. I'm like, no, take one or two things to start with and then come back to this video and take some more things away, but don't try and do all of them at the same time.
Yeah, it just start like you said, take one or two things and like focus on the little wins. Just focus on the little wins.
Yes. Yes. These things, both of us have been coaching for a while, and a lot of the things that we teach on are things that we have practiced ourselves, but it's taken us years to get to where we are. And you don't have to run the marathon. You can
Yeah.
just take it.
And I still need to remind myself this stuff, especially if I gotta say with like all the healing I've done, like just like those little wins, like whew, I'm like it's different after like, especially, I was talking about the Parkinson's after rehabbing, I don't even know, like thousands of patients as a OT. It's different being on the other side.
Mm,
It's been humbling. As frustrating as it's been humbling. And that's one thing, like I'm just saying that from my own experience as I'm navigating it right now, is like focus on those wins. Just a little one. And maybe it is that you remember just to write when your period started. Boom. Great. You remember to eat today in the middle of like being in the middle of work, and you're like, I need to eat. Not because I'm maybe super hungry, but just because I know I can't starve myself and then I'm gonna like be all over the place later. Or you got up and like had some water. Staying hydrated is important.
yeah. When I do my coaching sessions, the first thing, like I said before, is we do the transition exercise. The very second thing I do is we celebrate wins.
Yeah.
And wins are relative to you. A lot of people are trying to do celebrations and wins based on what they think seems important, but everything is really relative. So something for an ADHDer, because your brains are amazing, some of the things that a neurotypical person would celebrate is not hard for you because your brain is magnificent. But some things that a neurotypical person does that is not anything they would ever celebrate, like remembering to put their laundry from the washer to the dryer. They're like, that's a normal thing. Why would you celebrate? No, celebrate the fuck out of that because that's really important. So when you're watching this video, make sure you write down or say out loud to somebody your biggest takeaways from this, and then implement slowly, one thing, two things at a time. Um, and it's on here on YouTube, so you can come back to it if you want. Hit Kim up. I'm gonna make sure I put her stuff in the back on the whatever it's called underneath the YouTube video. So if you want to connect with her, please feel free to connect with her. And also feel free to connect with me. We would love to talk to you more about this and the specific questions you have going on in your world.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I even learned a little from you today, Jess. So thank you. I always love learning new things. And this has just been a different topic, like understand the hormonal side, but like from this perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you
So
so much, Kim.